Welcome to this week's Talking Politics Q&A. Robert is here with me, and we have a whole bunch of questions for you. We will try and crack through them relatively swiftly, which is the style of this podcast. Jonathan C. on Facebook says, can you ever envisage a UK government banning the burka? That's an interesting question.
Well, I've got the one circumstance in which that's going to happen.
Okay, go on.
Somehow, the Republic of France and the monarchy of the United Kingdom become one country. But those are the only.
Explain.
Well, no, it's only that in France they have no problem with banning face coverings and but I honestly no, I can't. There's no world. There is no. Because we have very different political traditions to a country like France, where basically all ordinances from the state, l'État, are not in a sense feared or resented. Quite the we have a certain view of freedom in this country, and in particular how we dress, whoever you are, is not something we feel the state should be interfering in. So I simply can't see a world in which the burqa would ever ban.
I tend to agree with that, and I know a lot of people listening to this or watching it might actually really want it to be banned and might have very good reasons for wanting it from their particular political perspective. But all I would say is you can't really have freedom to wear and say what you want and then start qualifying it. I mean, obviously, we can all think of examples where, in some senses, it is qualified. But, basically, you can go out in the street in this country wearing pretty much what you want. And if you start saying, well, you can wear this but not this, I think you get yourself into a world of pain.
I mean, here's just one. Here's one relevant sort of issue, or from my personal life. Here, I had my phone snatched by a bloke on a bike wearing a balaclava, deliberately, because he knows otherwise you'll be caught on CCTV. I mean, it is not a thing in this country that people should not be allowed to wear balaclavas on the streets. Now, I have to say, when that happened to me, I thought, this is absolutely appalling that this man is able to disguise himself in this way. And then I thought, well, then does that mean that we should have a rule that says once you get on a bicycle, you can't wear a balaclava? I'm not sure that's going to fly as policy.
No, indeed. Now, Larry Jones, was anti-terror law really written to stop groups like Palestine Action? I'd say no. And I think it's a decision that a lot of people question and have a problem with. That said, can you really as a group vandalise property and expect not to have some sort of legal comeback? What do you think? It's complicated.
So look, obviously they broke the law, right?
I mean, more than once.
I mean, on multiple occasions. I mean, look, the issue is, are they terrorists? It's sort of, I've read the Home Office's explanation for why they're doing this, and, they say they meet the criteria for being categorised as terrorists. I think some of us felt, we didn't realise that threshold of vandalism whether it's to public or private property, qualifies as terrorism. And so, I don't know, I don't feel totally comfortable about it, if I'm honest, because, maybe we've got a government that is drawing the line in terms of defining, because, defining terrorism, maybe we've got a government that is drawing the line when it comes to defining terrorists at a place where most British people will think, well, that is just about acceptable. But this is a slippery slope. What you don't want is simply governments in a position to take away massively the civil liberties of protests that most of us would regard as legitimate.
I think we're both in agreement. I think to me, it felt like a hasty decision. I think we can politely call it a pretty controversial decision. And, was that really what anti-terror laws were drawn up?
And it's a bit like, the great fuss, over the, God, I've forgotten their name now, the rap group, the Irish rap group.
Kneecap.
I mean, it's a bit like the fuss over Kneecap. I mean, really? Should the Prime Minister be saying he wishes Glyndebourne had dropped them? I mean,
Glastonbury. If they'd been playing at Glyndebourne, that would have been...
That's a good one.
That would have been
Glastonbury.
They're playing at Glastonbury.
But I mean, it just seemed to me all he's actually doing in practice is actually giving them all sorts of publicity, which means presumably they're going to make more money. But
as we very frequently discuss, the Prime Minister has many, many more important things to do, surely, than expressing an opinion on whether kneecap should be performing at Glasgow. But anyway, if
wish
there
it was Glyndebourne, that would be quite avant-garde.
Okay, Nicola Montano, is the UK legally obliged to give free accommodation to illegal migrants? Yes, it is under the law, the 1999 Act. I also think, there's a number of things potentially in this question. I mean, do we really want people who are already in this country to be, roaming the streets in the freezing cold of winter? I don't think anyone really wants that. I think that, what may lie behind the question is the small boats crisis, illegal migration. It does undermine kind of faith in our system and all the rest of it. And I think we're all agreed that something, this is an area for urgent and important government action. And, it's not like other ideas haven't been proposed. For example, some people have suggested that we should just simply be prepared to accept a greater share of migrants across Europe or asylum seekers across Europe so that we can do a deal with the French or the Germans to simply immediately return people who come in small boats. That might end the small boats crisis. Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, look, there's obviously, that's one of the big issues at the moment is how you reduce the number of people risking their lives to seek asylum in the UK. No issue about that. But look, some senior people from Reform, have said very publicly, these people should just be on the streets. Really? I mean, it's not just the humane issue.
Well,
it's also
practical issue.
Just to do with crime. It's just. I mean, anyway. So
okay, we're agreed. Chaz Townley, Starmer is toast, but do disaffected Labour voters like me receive enough media coverage of my natural choices, Lib Dems and the Greens? I feel like we've had this question a lot, and I do understand it, and I think it's a kind of fair point. I guess what I would say is that one of the things about being in the news is you're kind of focused on what's new. And what tends to be new often is what the government has done because it has an immediate impact on people, or a new political phenomenon like reform. Now, we are also obliged under, all the various acts and regulated by Ofcom to make sure we give people impartial coverage and all the rest of it. And we balance our coverage, and that's particularly, of course, the case when we've got elections and all the rest of it. It does worry me a bit that the Lib Dems and the Greens maybe don't get as much coverage as they perhaps sometimes should, but it's difficult on a day-to-day basis when you're dealing with whatever the government may just have done. What do you think?
So, I do think, actually, and I'm now going to go away and look at these rules, that it is altogether likely that the rules that we have to follow as broadcasters in terms of giving people, due weight in terms of our broadcasts, aren't fit for purpose. And the only reason, I say this as a matter of theory rather than because I've looked at the detail of them recently, but the reason I say that is because they were drawn up at a time when broadly there were two big parties and, one, certainly in terms of the UK, putting Scotland to one side, obviously SNP, incredibly important in Scotland, but in the UK, Lib Dems were a small party and the Greens were even smaller. And nobody thought that the Greens or the Lib Dems stood cat's chance in hell of becoming the governing party. And we've now got, certainly in terms of vote share, Reform significantly in most polls out in front. We got the Lib Dems with a load of seats in Parliament, and we got the Greens polling better than they've ever done. And so it seems to be theoretically possible, but forgive me, dear listener, I need to go back and look at these rules, that it is possible that, the sort of impartiality and due weight rules, given that we are living through this period of extraordinary fragmentation of, essentially voter support, maybe they're not quite right for this world. So maybe we should look at it, both you and I, and come back to it.
Well, we will. That's a good question, and has created more homework for Robert and I. So well done. Final question, I think, then. Lizzie Steele. Have you ever seen a politician cry? This is an interesting question. I mean, yes, Theresa May when she left office, Margaret Thatcher when she left office, Neil Kinnock, David Cameron. I think I've seen David Cameron cry. Who else have you seen cry?
Well, you've sort of run through the sort of public examples that one can think of. I suppose is Lizzie asking the question because she thinks we should, we need to see more politicians cry? Does she think crying is that we should see more? Is it because we don't see honest emotions from British politicians enough?
Well, Theresa May was kind of quite widely criticised for crying. Do you remember that? Have I misremembered that? I think there was quite a lot of.
I thought it was a good. She was a very buttoned up person, and actually, when she cried, I have to say, I thought it. I mean, it was touching and humanising. So, if she was criticised, I think that's sad, actually.
It was a bit like, do you remember when Gordon Brown left office and he came out with Sarah and his two boys, and he'd been so sort of careful to protect his family from the public glare, and it was an extraordinarily emotional day. I thought it was sort of, here was a guy who, whether you liked his politics or didn't like his politics, or liked him or didn't like him, had done his best. I think most people view him as an essentially decent man. Maybe some people would argue with that, but I think even people who didn't like him had some sort of respect for him. I don't know. Seeing more of the human side of politicians wouldn't hurt, I'd say.
No, I rather agree with that. I mean, if you spend your life with it, which I do, calling on politicians to be less frightened of speaking the truth and trying to persuade them that actually it's in their political interest to speak the truth, because I do think the big driver of disillusionment with politics in general is that British people think that none of them can be trusted. A corollary of, answering questions that you and I put to them honestly is also just show us how you feel. So if we all feel horrified by some of the images that we watch about, some of the appalling events going on in the world, and one of the things that is hard if you do our job is to internalize stress, and seeing whether it was pictures of people murdered on October the 7th, or pictures of civilians killed by the Israeli Defense Force, children, women, civilians in Gaza. These are profoundly upsetting images. We, when we broadcast about them, have to do so in a professional way. And so we know the stress that there is of internalizing emotions. And a bit more, certainly from our politicians, I think a bit more freedom for them to express how they feel would be a good thing.
The final thought is, it makes me think that I've only seen one politician leave power voluntarily in my lifetime, Tony Blair. And now I come to...
Well, only semi-voluntarily.
Semi-voluntarily.
It wasn't as though there wasn't a 10-year campaign by his closest ally to get rid of him. But anyway.
But that was a weird event as well, wasn't it? Because on the one hand, two of the best speeches, just in terms of performance I've ever seen given, were his last speech to the party conference, which you will remember, and his last speech to his constituency at Sedgefield, which you will also remember. Both incredibly brilliant speeches, very emotional. It was almost like the party wondering, was it a good idea to get rid of you? But and he sort of held himself together, but the kind of suppressed emotion was there the whole way through, and it kind of made it an intriguing thing. Anyway, it just reminds you that, there is just a lot of drama in politics, and maybe that's why we love covering it so much. We need to stop there. We will be back to talking politics with our team in the US on Monday. Robert and I will be back here midweek, and then for Q&A later. But that's it. Have a great weekend.